Hi, this is Greg Kesich at the Portland Press Herald, here with my Sunday friends, Bill Nemitz, Caron, Cynthia Dill.
Good afternoon.
And we're here to talk a little bit about things that have been going on this week and looking ahead to some topics that we might be writing about. We want to talk about the governor and his mysterious trips to Washington. Speaking of mystery in Washington, we'll probably like to talk about the wiretapping allegations coming out of the White House, against the White House, former occupant. But I'd like to start with something that you wrote about today, Bill, panhandling in Portland. And it's the kind of thing those of us who work downtown and live in Portland encounter a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's always a lot of tension about, whether or not you give to panhandlers or not, and do you look at them in the eye or not? And do you want to talk about your column?
Yeah,
how it came
well,
about?
actually, I know the issue here in Portland, of course, was this proposal that's bouncing around City Hall right now, whereby they'll have a pilot program that will take a handful of these panhandlers twice a week and put them to work for 6 hours and give them breakfast and lunch and pay them, I think, $10 and change an hour, the city's minimum wage. So that was developing. But what really caught my eye this week was this interview that the Pope did with a magazine in Milan, where he's about to visit. And they asked him the question, how do you handle panhandlers? And he said, unequivocally, you give to them. And not only do you give to them, but you look them in the eye, you touch them on the hand, and you make a connection with them. And then the magazine asks, but what about, I love the way they put it, what if he uses it to go and get a glass of wine?
Right.
Which, in Italy, that's what they do. And he said, essentially, that doesn't matter. You shouldn't worry yourself with that. In fact, don't we all have, I think that we put something to the effect of secret pleasures that we conduct in secrecy. So, who are we to deny this person that simple pleasure? And it just got me thinking about the contrast between a city like Portland that has tried and tried and tried to do something about what they see as a problem, and that is people standing on median strips begging for money, and the Vatican, the Pope, who's saying there's not a problem here. You give, and that's it. Plain and simple. So I threw it out, and then I talked to my wife about it, and of course I canonized her in the column because she's had a couple of interesting experiences the past few months where not only does she interact with a couple of downtown panhandlers, but she actually went and bought food for one, and then went up to her office and got more food. He was afraid he was going to lose custody of his kids. The HHS saw that he had no food in his apartment. And then in another case, this guy sang her a song. And she ended up looking in her purse and seeing she only had $5 and gave it to him. To which I told her, "Are you out of your mind?" Oh, and then he asked for a hug, which she gave him. And I'm listening to this story thinking, what are you doing? But now, in light of what I read about the Pope's interview and in listening to her tell that story, I'm thinking, depending on who you are, it can be complicated or it cannot be complicated. And I'm not suggesting everybody should give everything to every single panhandler, but it does provide a counterbalance to this ongoing effort to control the problem.
I had a physical response when I read the interview with the Pope. It must have been in the Washington Post, the Times. When I read that, I had just like this kind of exhale feeling of like, that's so exactly right. And it was so refreshing to read because I always used to, especially with my kids, trying to set an example, never thought twice about giving to panhandlers, but then something changed. I don't know if it was the number of panhandlers or my observation that there seemed to be a lot of drugged out people panhandling. And so that caused me some personal, I was uncomfortable with it. But I liked your column and I loved what the Pope said. And it makes it a lot easier. But the politics is tough.
I had a similar reaction to this. I wrote about it in the column. This one guy down in the Old Port came running up to me one day, all sweaty, all out of breath. Man, you got to help me. My car's over by the bridge. I just ran out of gas. I got to pick up my kids. I really got to be there in a half hour. Can you help me out? Can you help me out? So I gave him $1. Figured, I don't know. And 3 days later, the guy runs up to me again with the same story.
Yeah, right.
And I said I had no money. And then within a week, same guy, third time. And this time I had a few choice words for him, which he didn't stick around for. He just kind
was he the guy that I ran out of gas on the bridge?
Yeah,
I remember that guy. Yeah, he had a very. It was like it looked real.
It did,
and it was like he acted it well.
Yeah,
but it was the same story every time. I ran out of gas on the bridge. I gotta get my car out. I'm gonna tow it. I don't have the money for the tow.
He's like a pinball bouncing around the old port, hitting people with this story.
I do think though the Pope would say, if a guy's going to tell you the same story over and over again, just give it to him.
I know. And that's the hard part.
Right.
Or the easy part.
Even if you're being conned, that's the challenge. Yeah.
I've had two observations about this, and they're both about technology. And one is that I never have any cash.
Yeah.
I always have. I pay for everything. I can buy a cup of coffee with a debit card, and so I never have any cash. And I wonder how that affects panhandling.
Well, how long will it be before panhandlers start having swipe machines?
Just give me
That's
the
okay.
card.
I can
Venmo it.
I'll be right back with your card.
It's like tipping at Starbucks.
And the other is there's something different about somebody walking up to you on the street and talking to you, and then coming in trying to talk to you while you're driving in your car. And I'm not really sure what it is, except for in your car, I think you have this expectation of privacy, and you're in the bubble. You're singing along to the radio or whatever, and
or you're worried that if the light changes, people are going to start honking at you to go.
And and maybe and so there's something strange about the guys with the signs standing in the median.
There is, and. There's the whole public safety argument that has been rehashed ad infinitum, but it just comes down to that basic decision. I thought the New York Times in their editorial put it very well, and what they said was that we all have our criteria.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If it's a woman, maybe yes. If it's a man, no. If they're dressed this way or that way. If they're sober or not. And what the Times said is essentially what you're doing every time you cross paths with one of these people is you're conducting your own little merit testing process to decide who's worthy and who isn't. And that's what the Pope, I think, was saying is, no, that's not your place.
Right.
Your place is just to give.
And so now I think the city of Portland has a new program rolling out to...
They're proposing it.
Doesn't seem like it's very highly funded, but that seems like a good thing.
Would come around and offer people to voluntarily get in and work for the day, pay them $10.68 an hour, and then give them a couple of meals. And at the end of the day, not only would they pay them out, but they would get them in touch with services.
Yeah, they'd have to go to the city's human services office to get paid, and that would provide the contact point for these people to maybe get plugged into other things.
And did you see the one quote in there that struck my eye was the guy who said, well, I'm making better than $20 an hour with the sign, so I don't know if I'd want to do that, which is like, you're not doing very good for the community of panhandlers, my friend.
Right. But it also...
I would never advise anybody not to tell the truth to a reporter, but in this case, maybe you should have.
But it demonstrates that people are, in fact, giving if he can pull down that kind of money.
And he's making a
someone's
rational
giving it to him.
Choice, right? This is the thing that conservatives always say. It's like they make a rational choice not to work, and that never made any sense to me because there's all these benefits that come from working, psychological benefits, feeling of self-esteem, that people actually do want to work if they can. Mm-hmm. But.
And then the question becomes whether or not if they don't do a good job, should they still get paid? I mean, and if you're just going to hand out money for people who aren't even really trying to do a good job, then why have the program? You might as well just hand them the cash.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, if you're getting general assistance in Portland, you have to be working. You have to do work fare or be in a Portland adult ed
I'm saying, like, if the van that picks up the people panhandling and puts them to work for the day, if the person is enthusiastic and does the work and gets paid, that's great. If the person doesn't do the job, I'm just wondering. Well, anyway, let's move on.
Okay. So what do you think, Alan? Are we going to do? Have we seen the future of healthcare?
Yeah, to me, it looks like just what any of us could have predicted months ago, and most of us did. I mean, the Republicans have never had a health care plan in the last 50 years. They've never had one.
They were against Medicare.
That they could agree to.
Medicaid.
They've never had a health care plan, and they had a free ride for the last 8 years because all they could do was 7 years. All they had to do was say no. I think it's great, delicious fun that it's now all plopped on their desk, and there isn't a chance in the world, as far as I'm concerned, that they're going to come up with a consensus plan because they've got Democrats and Republicans in safe states who want to kill the thing. They've got people in the real world who are actually in competitive races coming up who don't want tens of thousands of people in their state suddenly to not have health care. And that's just on the Republican side. So where do you get majority votes in the Senate? I don't care how many committee hearings you have, what kind of bill comes out of the House. How do you get it through the Senate? And they don't even have...
They don't have a majority right now.
No. It's been interesting to watch the president's evolution on the issue.
Yeah.
So just 3 weeks ago, this is going to be better. It's going to cost less, better care. Nobody's going to lose. Now he's aggressively supporting the plan that, by most estimates, will cost 10 million, as many as 20 million people to lose their insurance.
I don't know if evolution
so what happens? And nobody's going to lose their insurance.
What I think is interesting is especially in the House, they're really fast tracking this right now, which is predictable. But what I find stunning is that they're doing this and they've yet to receive a CBO score on this legislation. Right. The Congressional Budget Office has yet to tell us how much this thing's going to cost. Now, if you recall, during the Affordable Care Act deliberations, it was all about the CBO score. That's all that they were debating, and whether it was right here or wrong there. And this train has left the station before the Congressional Budget Office has even weighed in.
I think it's the classic case of the dog catching the car. You know, that all of a sudden Republicans are like, oh, wait, Obamacare without Obama is health care? And they're discovering that, like, you know, underneath this Obamacare is actually a policy that insures millions of people, that reduces the deficit, that provides protections that a lot of people, like you said, are not going to just walk away from. I mean, I think they're rushing in the House because there all of a sudden is this curve of people suddenly realizing, like, oh, Obamacare is my health insurance? Right. I thought it was some left-wing, you know, conspiracy to redistribute wealth.
Well,
as long as it's not a government program, I like it.
Yeah, under Democrat.
I read this interesting piece by this guy, Yuval Levin, I think his name is. He's a conservative economist guy who said repeal and replace was something that was developed for the 2012 Mitt Romney campaign. And a key element was Mitt Romney becoming president in 2012 before people started getting their Obamacare. Right. And you could have pulled this off 4 years ago, but you can't do it now. It's already too entrenched. You can't do it without taking insurance away from tens of millions of people. Well, two tens, 20 million people, a lot of people, and upset the markets for everybody. I think when Trump was talking about the cost of Obamacare, he was talking about what it costs individuals to buy it. I think that's what Trump voters saw, and that's what a lot of people are experiencing. I think I've experienced it. The health insurance is costs too much. But what the Republicans in Congress are talking about are the cost of those big tax increases on high incomes and the cost of the program overall. And you can cut those, but you're not going to make the healthcare costs go down.
Right. And I think there was some reporting today that the chief complaint, or one of the chief complaints about Obamacare, is the increase in premiums. But what the story I think it was the Times said today, was that for 90% of people who get their insurance through their employer, only 10% of the population buys insurance through Obamacare, and of that, 85% get subsidy. So it's even like, when
it comes to the extreme,
it's just a very small group of people who have experienced dramatic increases in premiums, and that was happening before Obamacare. So
it was worse.
Yeah,
it was worse before. Yeah.
It's like increasing healthcare costs didn't get invented in the last 3 years or 2 years.
Exactly.
Deductibles. Obama, thanks Obama for giving us deductibles.
And the fact that the Republicans included defunding Planned Parenthood just so politicizes the discussion. I mean, there's just no rational reason to defund Planned Parenthood because they don't spend any taxpayer money on abortions and they get reimbursed for health care like anyone else. And it's just a political fight that they apparently think they're going to win. I don't see them winning that.
Well, they're going to win in the home districts. I mean, I think they do want to get it out of the House quickly before anybody knows what it costs. And then they can say, we did our job, folks.
The Senate, it fell down.
The Senate, you got to get rid of those senators.
So, no bill at all?
I think a bill, out of the Congress collectively?
That Trump signs.
Not in the near future. I think we're headed right back into the same stalemate that we saw with Obamacare.
And the longer
I think that
it's
going to hit the Senate, and it's going to stall and stall and stall. And I think the panic is going to set in because we're going to get closer and closer to the midterms. I don't know what's worse for the Republicans, that they go ahead and repeal and replace and tick off their base when they realize that they've been had, or if they get caught up in the politics of it and don't accomplish anything between now and the midterm. It's a lose-lose for them. Either way, they lose. My gut tells me they lose bigger if they actually ram something through right now that's going to hurt a lot of the very people who elected them.
The political exposure is beyond anyone's calculation. I mean, they've got to be scared to death in both the House and the Senate. If you're in anything but a deep red state, you can't know how ferocious it will be out there. You remember what you did to Democrats in the off-year election, and you've got to have some apprehension that the same thing comes back at you. But it's even worse because you have these millions of people who have health care, who are going to lose it. And I just can't see them. I think they're all going to look for something to vote on, some committee vote or some, they can go back home and say, but it's not going to mean anything.
It might be the first time we see perhaps new coalitions form, because we're in this new political era with this kind of odd president who keeps flip-flopping really about Obamacare. And, are the unions going to sit down and work with Senator Collins on, it's just going to be interesting to see who is at the table and what comes out in the long run. It could be just some minor tweaks to the bill that everyone agrees needs some improvement. And maybe there's credit given if it passes, but it'll just be interesting to me to see who comes together. The American Medical Association has come out opposed. The insurance companies, they've done well under Obamacare. Who?
I know people who buy insurance on the exchanges who are not crazy about Obamacare. And, there are things that really could fix it. I was talking to a relative who's, early 30s, who has a pre-existing condition, makes about $40,000 a year, and puts her at she gets the tiniest little bit of subsidy, below median income, even in Maine. But she doesn't really get much subsidy at all, and the plans are very expensive, and the deductibles are high, and you wonder who's doing anything for her. And what I'm seeing a lot on the Democratic side is suddenly people have fallen in love with Obamacare. Okay, that's the one thing that Trump has achieved is suddenly people are saying nice things about Obamacare, but there are some real weaknesses in it. It was never more than a first step, and it should have been amended all down the line, but it hasn't been because of the politics of it. But I'm wondering if there's something small that you could put together an atypical coalition around improving access.
Right.
Making it affordable for
a lot of it's going to be semantics. Ultimately, politically, what you call it is going to make all the difference, no matter how much it resembles Obamacare, which in so many respects it will. And that's where I think the art of Donald Trump kicks in, because he's the big variable here. If it stalls on Capitol Hill, there's no big loyalty or bond between him and the Republicans in Congress. So if he feels like they're not getting it done, he's, in one way or the other, he's going to be the first one to cut and run.
Yeah.
And he's either going to suddenly pivot and say something to the effect that Obamacare wasn't that bad, or he's going to vilify the Republicans on the Hill for not going further. But what you're going to have...
He's a blame first.
Right.
Explain later.
It will be somebody's fault. I'm pretty sure we'll know
what
that.
What you'll have here is a dynamic that you didn't have back in, 2010, and that was you had Obama and the Democrats working in unison back then. And the further down this road we go, I think the less likelihood there is that Trump and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan are all going to stay on the same page. And it will be, once again, this
and never mind the Liberty Caucus.
Right.
And the
Rand Paul. Right. It's going to be this bizarre situation where the Democrats will simply step back and watch all these different factions of the Republican Party cannibalize each other.
And remind people, how's your Obamacare today? How is that free well visit? How is that birth control working out that you don't have to pay for any longer? I mean, there's a lot of benefits in Obamacare that I think all of a sudden, like I said, now that Obama's gone, and it's potentially on the ropes, I think there's going to be a lot of education about what it is.
Yeah, and we've got a perfect illustration of how deep the divisions are with the headline in the paper over the last couple of days that LePage and Collins both opposed the bill.
Right.
But they opposed them for diametrically different reasons.
The middle is shrinking.
More people cut. And she actually said on the record, I want health care for more people. Right. How do you resolve that?
Right.
I've got $1 for a panhandler who can explain to me the governor's position on this bill, because I'm listening to him and he's saying it's really hard on old people, on the seniors. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And it's really hard on low-income people, and this is going to make it extra hard on Maine because we're, we are disproportionately, we got a lot of seniors, we got a lot of sick people. I'm thinking, okay. And then he says, I think we should just get rid of all the subsidies and we should just let the free market take care of it.
Law of the jungle.
Every man and woman for themselves. Right.
Wait a minute.
I know.
What is that going to do to the seniors?
Right.
But those two positions perfectly reflect the division, I think, between the House Republican far-right element and the more moderate elements in the Senate, and also some in the House. I mean, you can't reconcile that. And if you could, it wouldn't be with a guy like Trump, who will, in no time, change his position three times, all announced in tweets, and then blame everybody.
Right. So what about the governor? He's going down to Washington again this week. What's he doing down there? Did he tell you?
He's also doing these little town meetings in the first CD. To me, that all looks like he's trying to line up support for the Senate race that he's talked about. He's going back down. They just announced, so twice in 3 weeks. And maybe he's looking for a job. I'm sure if they throw him a job, he'll be interested in talking about it.
Like what?
But if not, I mean, I think he's exploring the race, and the trips to the first congressional district haven't been going great.
Yeah.
So that's a little problematic. And I'm sure their calculation is they can win the second CD, and they just have to limit their losses in the first CD.
Well,
I don't accept either premise. But
we've talked about this before too. There is a certain sacrificial element to that, where if he can come down here and get the crap kicked out of him, it actually works to his advantage. in terms of at least mobilizing his base for yet another election. And, I think that people who dismiss him at this point do so at their own peril. I think he's going to be even
dismiss him.
Certainly in a three-way race, and perhaps even in a two-way race, he would be a formidable candidate.
And really the only one. Like if you were the Koch brothers and you were looking for a pickup, a Republican pickup in the Senate, who in Maine would you consider a good contender? From the Republican side, other than the governor. What? Like get Olympia Snow out of retirement?
No,
there's Susan Collins run for both seats.
Right.
There really isn't another one. Anybody, he would be. I would assume very attractive to national donors, and
certainly a group of them, that support that type of candidate.
And Angus King's, high profile. I think I saw. Last Friday, Mark Shields, they were bemoaning the lack of anybody with national stature to be able to investigate the Russia hacking. And Mark Shields on PBS NewsHour said, you could have a commission with John McCain and Angus King. And if you're a Trump loyalist, maybe that's a guy you want to get rid of. Maybe you don't want somebody like that around in D.C.
So maybe the visits aren't being initiated from here.
Yeah.
We're going to speculate about the
visits.
Maybe he's being called down.
He's auditioning
to explore this option of how to, derail. Mm-hmm. Angus King, if he gets reelected, he's on a trajectory to have some major influence down there. He's there now, but he's going to have more influence going forward, particularly on his health care and some other critical issues. So I can see where they'd love to cut him off as soon as they can. This is really your last shot, I think. After that, he's, he'll be there as long as he wants to be there.
I think his plan is 2 terms, which would make him, I think, 80 at the end of his second term. Right, by Senate standards, you're right. But I don't think, I wonder if his forward thinking goes beyond the end of the second term. But that's a lot. 6 years is a long time.
Yeah.
So,
but you're skeptical.
No, I think definitely that LePage is running for the United States Senate and is down in Washington in part to, shore up the beginning of a campaign and some donors and put some infrastructure in place. But I also I see him getting Potomac fever. It's really addicting. You go down to Washington and you're just in this energy of power and money, and you're recognized because your face is always on, late night television. I see him disgusted with the Maine legislature. He doesn't like his standard of living with $70,000 income in the Blaine house.
Like a nun.
Yeah, like a nun. And what's he going to do? Go back and work at Martin's? After you're governor of the state of Maine, you go to Washington.
Yeah.
Well, he's got to hope that the economy holds up for another year and that Trump doesn't implode. Because if he does, LePage's statement about I was Trump before Trump are going to be played all over the airwaves if Trump's numbers continue to collapse. And historically, that association is actually going to hurt him, I think, unless the economy continues to grow. But we're running towards the end of the cycle on the economy.
You know what number is not collapsing is Trump's approval among Republicans.
Yeah,
which is mid-80s right now.
What last I saw was 90, which is about what he did on election day, and as long as that holds up, I think that affects everything else we've been talking about, all the machinations in Congress. I don't think they start turning their backs on him until Republicans.
No, I'm talking about a year from now. Like we're just beginning this congressional session. Right now we're still in the big idea phase. Pretty soon we're going to run into the gravel and the dirt and the mud, and all this stuff's going to grind to a halt, and they're going to be looking to, well and good, they'll spin it as best they can, but if the economy goes down,
I just don't see it. I don't see it happening with the economy. And I see Trump saying, if Obamacare doesn't get repealed and replaced, it's the Congress's fault. We tried to drain the swamp, but we're unsuccessful. Time. And he was he got these high marks for his speech. And if he can do one or two of those a month and always be on TV with his beautiful family, and the economy stays good, I think there's nothing he can do wrong.
Except for maybe tweet.
Yeah, he got 24 hours of good press on the speech before the Sessions thing. And then he got 72 hours of horrendous press on those tweets. It was relentless.
Well, you mean on the bugging of Trump Tower thing? Yeah. Right.
So they thought that was some brilliant move. Because nobody had any say in it.
He basically can't put together 3 news cycles of positive coverage or even neutral coverage. And that's been consistent since inauguration.
But we said that all through the campaign. Like, he's stepping all over himself. He had some good news and he's ruining it. But I get letters to the editor that say, well, now that we've heard that Obama was tapping Donald Trump's phones, do we really have to waste our time talking about Russia? Yeah. And these aren't from high party mechanics. They're just from regular folks who don't listen to everything and they hear something and they latch onto it. Yeah.
Well, it's just amazing what comes out of the press secretary's mouth. In one press conference, he'll say, I forget exactly. It was something like, we have to find out if Trump was in fact wiretapped. Isn't that a question that we need to answer? And then he slipped a piece of paper that says, and actually, we denounce and have no reason to believe that there was ever investigation. He's not an investigation. This is in the same conference.
I need you to have an investigation of whether what I'm saying is true. I have no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what's I thought just fascinating is FBI Director Comey, encouraging the Justice Department to state publicly that the FBI did not wiretap, and then the Justice Department refusing and saying no comment. And it's just it's bizarre.
I don't think, but as fascinating and for some people aggravating as all this is, I agree that this is not what's going to bring down Donald Trump. This is becoming the daily chatter. Yeah. Granted, it's at a whole level that we in our lifetimes have never experienced before. But I continue to think that Trump's fate will hinge on something, some act, some transgression for which he will be held accountable, not by his base, who will never waver. Like you said, Craig, they think Obama bugged Trump Tower right now. Yeah. But rather some transgression for which he'll be held accountable by our system of government. And that's a pretty high threshold at this point. But my gut tells me that he's going to cross that threshold. Something's going to happen that is no longer just inadvisable or no longer just inexplicable. It's going to be illegal. And once
dangerous.
Yeah. And once you cross that line, and once you have some kind of illegality that is provably true, everything changes.
Right. Yeah.
I wish that was the case, but I just think he is just so sophisticated and so used to being chased. He knows this
I don't
game.
think he's the one who's going to get him into trouble. I think it's the people around him who are going to get him into trouble.
Yeah.
The trouble I'm talking about is not with the base, and it's not of that sort, though I agree. It's with those swing voters who believe that he's going to bring back high-paying, blue-collar jobs. Right. And so it may not be a general downturn in the economy, but certainly when he runs for re-election and those people are doing a gut check, if they can't say it's better, they're a pretty fickle group. And I think that's the group that turns on them. Is that 5 or 10% of the electorate? I don't know. But it's of that order. And
so look at LePage. Use LePage as your as your teacher there. And what happened, where go and ask the average person, where is Maine's economy right now relative to where it was in 2010? has Paul LePage improved Maine's economy or has he hurt Maine's economy? I don't think you're going to get a definitive answer right now.
Yeah, and I don't think he was as bold with the predictions of bringing back manufacturing.
Right.
Which in those Rust Belt states was like throwing candy off the platform. I mean, people wanted to believe it. They want to believe it. They hope for it.
Carrier air conditioners.
It was a lot more specific.
Right.
I mean, he went around and said more about government than he did about the economy.
Yeah.
And taxes and
he said taxes is going to reduce the size of government, the involvement of government in people's lives, which he said had a negative result, and some big macroeconomic things like change the price of energy, and that was going to improve Maine's economy, and that was going to put more people to work. And they're claiming, part of this resume building thing is they're claiming that all that's happened. Mm-hmm. They show that from the depths of the recession to now, unemployment went down, and they say, look how many fewer people we have on Medicaid. It's like, yeah, no kidding. It was a recession.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And
You're taking credit. You're taking credit for the recession. For everything. They do the same thing with education funding, and they claim that they've done all this stuff that's just like a natural cyclic response to what was happening to the national economy.
Things that they've done deliberately when it comes to TANF and SNAP and things like that. Look, our numbers are down. Well, they are. They're down because...
And guess what numbers are up?
Because
poor people, hungry people,
Right, but he does get good, I thought the story the other day about him increasing the rainy day fund. And
making, it didn't.
But the story, the headline was, there's something...
$1 billion.
In large part thanks to Paul LePage.
Well, that was Fox News. He was on Fox and Friends and they said, quote, the guy on Fox said, "You're right. That's one heck of a rainy day fund you have there, Governor." When in fact, it was a daily cash balance.
Cash.
It's nice.
It means they don't have to do short-term borrowing.
Right.
For weekly expenditures.
Right. He's done some things, though, that he can point to on his resume. Like the pension reform and
the tax cut.
Yeah, the tax cuts and paying the hospital. I mean, paying the hospital seems old, but I think he's going to have an economic message when he runs for Senate against Angus King. And that's going to be interesting because, I don't know, I mean, Angus King was governor a long time ago, but I'm sure there's going to be some side-by-side comparison about, who is the better governor. And it'll be interesting to see how Angus King manages the spotlight going forward in this foreign affairs. His role on the Intelligence Committee, it just seems like that could just put Paul LePage in the rearview mirror so far back that there's just no catching up.
Yeah.
Or it could be, people could say, I don't care. That's not interesting to me.
He's sitting around a committee room
I'm more interested in what's going to happen to the paper mill.
One thing that will be interesting with LePage's posture toward the state of Maine is he's spent, much to many people's dismay, he spent so much of his 2 terms now disparaging Maine and always saying how bad it is and how terrible it is. Look for a big pivot when he declares his candidacy for the Senate. And all of a sudden, Maine is going to be the model for conservative governance. And look at all I've accomplished up there. And, those comments juxtaposed with all the bad-mouthing he's done over the last 6 or 7 years.
Right.
It's going to be a very interesting contrast because one of the biggest criticisms of him overall has been he doesn't really seem to like Maine.
No.
And that's about to change. Big time.
Right.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting race. I'm anxious to see the first polling on that race if it begins to shape up. Because they both have maximum name recognition, so you won't be picking up that. You'll be picking up a pretty good measure for early polling of how they go head to head. And I'm just anxious to see, is it close? Or is it really quite a gap? And that will affect the money flow and all of it. If it's a 20-point gap or a 15-point gap, that's pretty tough to make up against somebody who's generally well-liked and well-known. You can't sort of reintroduce somebody like that or have a surprise. It's pretty tough.
Makes me think that his Governor LePage's position on the House Republicans' repeal and replace of Obamacare is in fact a political one. That he's against it, and so is Angus King. So so there's the first round.
Right, and he can reel off all the platitudes about how he wants to help seniors.
Right.
By taking away their health insurance, So, Alan, you were telling us about a book you were reading. Do you want to talk about that?
The Daily Show.
Yeah.
It's great fun. It's a very long book. I'm doing audio tape.
Okay.
Because I'm traveling a lot in my car. But fantastic story of a very small show on a very small network with 300,000 viewers that by the time of I think it was the 1992 Republican convention, they were the leading network for coverage. I mean, it's astonishing what they did.
Satirical as it may have been.
Yeah.
Right.
But they became the voice of no bullshit, basically.
Right.
They were the ones that were not only calling out the politicians, but calling out the media as well for hypocrisy and saying crazy things.
And being very funny.
Catching the talking points. Showing you 10 different people saying the same phrase on 10 different shows. It was great.
Yeah, one person saying completely contradictory things over time. I mean, it's just great fun. This process of assembling a group of brilliant people who work really hard and have fun and have an impact.
And look what it's spawned. I mean, daily. One of my favorite features in the New York Times right now is a quick review of the late night monologues from the night before, which
I think it's funny
I can't stay up for anyway.
I can't stay up.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God for YouTube.
But demographically, it was a great thing for them to do because what a way to start your day. Then to go from Stephen Colbert to Jimmy Kimmel to right on down the line, and they all take their cue, I think, from Jon Stewart in that kind of really sharp, biting political humor.
The Daily Show.
He is
on the network. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's no hiding. It's just totally anti-Trump all the time. And Blunt still swears, even though he's not on a cable network and they have to bleep everything. But it's outrageous what he's doing, and his numbers have shot him into first place.
To the point where Jimmy Fallon is now changing his repertoire and becoming more political.
Yeah.
But so...
Except Colbert's been doing it for like 15 years.
Right.
Is this good? Is this a good thing in terms of an informed electorate?
It's therapeutic.
Yes.
It's fun.
Well, look, the right has had Fox all along.
And talk radio.
And they get their daily feed from that and Lombard and other things. I mean, the movement on the right has grown because there's a place to plug in every day. And the Daily Show gave that to not only progressives, but a lot of people in the center also who are just, cynical in general. But now it's, I'm astonished that Colbert's show is allowed to do that because they're really going hard. I mean, we've been taping it and watching it. I'm just shocked. That is not the Johnny Carson show.
Right. Remember the Smothers Brothers.
I was just going to say, remember the Smothers Brothers, getting booted off the air finally.
But they've decided to do what the Comedy Channel did with Jon Stewart, which is we'll take a niche of an audience. We're not going to try to keep everybody happy, and we're not going to never say anything that will upset anybody. We're just going for this group here. And it turns out, in this case, you do that, you become the leading show. It's brilliant.
But this point of view is just like retreating from power. The Colbert viewer, the Daily Show viewer is looking at the TV. Yeah, we control late night TV, but they have the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, state houses.
And there's always 2018.
I mean, it's all bills to the future.
I'm just concerned. It's one of these ways that the bubble gets made tougher. That you start thinking everybody that doesn't agree with you is stupid, and everybody's a hypocrite, and there's a certain
I think
isolating element to it.
I always felt though that Colbert and Jon Stewart treat people fairly. I mean, they would take a Democrat who made some sort of, hypocritical statement and, razz them just as much as Republicans. So I don't take it as them being necessarily so partisan irrationally. It's just that they take what's there and I think put it together in a way that just really communicates a powerful message. And I think it's really good.
Like it or not, it's where a tremendous number of younger Americans are getting not only their entertainment, but also their news these days. And I find that a little troubling.
And not just younger.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's we've aged into it.
Yeah, but they're hearing from Colbert or whoever it might be, Samantha Bee, whoever, what was in the New York Times today. They're not reading that themselves. And that gives me pause. I mean, it's one thing if you're informed and then you're listening to an informed show, poke fun at the news, that's one thing. But if you start consuming all of your information from a show like that, then aren't you going down the same road that the Fox audience did?
Right.
All the way to the White House.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Well, if it works.
Exactly. The difference for me is that when I watch Fox, I don't have any confidence that they're telling me the truth, whether they did it through comedy or not. I don't have
it's not particularly funny either.
Because I think they're driving an agenda.
Right.
When I listened to Jon Stewart, it was funny, but it was also rich with depth and clarity,
research.
and I could always trust what I was getting from those guys, knowing it was a joke. But it was they were transmitting. I mean, they were a mock show, but they picked 4 or 5 stories, just like the network news does, and they covered those stories, and they did it with an angle. But I never had a sense, and as I'm listening to this book, they all say, we never, that we know of, said something that was untrue.
Yeah, exactly.
Never did.
Yeah.
So they were the original attackers of fake news.
Right, but they still cherry pick.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
I mean, it's not what they're saying it's what they're leaving out.
Yeah, it's still entertaining.
Yeah, that's what makes it entertainment, right? And it's actually perhaps in some cases denying context.
But if the choice is a 25-year-old watching that show or reading the New York Times, I'm with you.
Yeah.
If the choice is watching that show or nothing,
right?
Then I'm happy that people find a medium that gives them some sense of how the world's organized.
I miss Jon Stewart. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
Anybody else reading anything they want to share with the group?
Well, I'm reading Home Safe by Elizabeth Berg, and it's pretty good. Is it
a novel?
It's a novel. It was given to me, and I'm kind of flying through it. When I came back from Denver, I had to spend 3 hours on the plane waiting to take off, so I got way into it. It's nice to be reading a novel.
I just finished Lost City of the Monkey God.
Wow.
Which is a fascinating book, nonfiction book about the search for and ultimately the discovery of a lost city, civilization in Honduras, deep in the rainforest. And just a fascinating tale of archaeology, politics, and a lot of not some Indiana Jones type swashbuckling too. There are a couple of things with snakes that kept me awake all night. But it was a great book by Douglas Preston. It's just a really nice piece of work.
I'm getting bogged down in a biography of Vladimir Putin, called the New Tsar, I think.
That sounds really entertaining.
And it's pretty entertaining. I mean, it's...
you watch it before The Daily Show?
Yeah, they would make a really good 2-minute segment on The Daily Show. It's like 900 pages. But I think the most interesting things I learned is that his parents were both survivors of the siege of Leningrad, where 1.5 million people died during World War II. They were encircled by the Russians and shelled and
Germans?
By the Germans.
By the Germans, thank you. Yeah. And they were shelled and they were starved to death. And that's like the world that he grew up in. And he was...
which would explain his strut.
Exactly. Right. And his, and he was a KGB guy, but he was not, sometimes we kind of imagine him as a super spy, but he was a very low level KGB guy. He was sent to, where was it? Like, somewhere in East Germany, but not Berlin. It was a second rate posting. And his big formative moment came when the Berlin Wall came down, and the people rushed to the Stasi headquarters and were like taking out all the files, and then they came to the KGB headquarters, and he came out all by himself and said, I appreciate what you're doing, but I want you to understand that this is Russian or this is Soviet property, and if you take another step, I will order the people inside to start shooting at you. And they left, and of course there was nobody inside to shoot, and so that's kind of his thing. It's
kind of like Joshua Chamberlain defending the State House.
Exactly, right.
Yeah,
so his thing is that he stands up, and he bluffs.
Right.
And I think that's something to keep in mind. This guy is like a tremendous bluffer.
Yeah.
And he's probably not really running the world, and he's probably not really throwing our elections. And he probably isn't really telling Trump what to do, but he doesn't mind any of us thinking that he might be. So anyway, I'll tell you, if it gets better, I'll let you know. I'm getting a little bogged down in the Yeltsin.
Well, I think you know where it ends
the
up.
Yeltsin years are pretty confusing, but I think we'll just say goodbye for now, and we will all get together again next week.
Have a great week.
See you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast.